Hey, welcome. So, I want to talk about these mothers, right? These moms. They enable their abusive sons. They absolutely do. Now, moms are not the cause of abuse, but let's talk about those toxic boy moms that absolutely enable their sons, right? You know, the ones that make excuses and they basically just downplay what their son does. They treat you like you're too sensitive, like you're too dramatic. And this might be somebody who's hugged you at Christmas and then told a judge that you're completely unstable, right? Or watched him scream at you and acting like that never happened. Maybe they make a snide remark about your parenting in front of him, and then they sort of turn to you and they smile like they just gave you some kind of compliment, right? Maybe they're giving you some passive aggressive message or note, even about how men are just like this and men need peace at home. You have to understand. I know my mother-in-law used to always say, you know, um, it takes two, and would say, this is how men are. And, what are you going to do? It is what it is, as if it was just this fact that couldn't be avoided. So they could, your abuser could call you a name, could slam doors, could do anything. And this is the type of mother that will always side with her son, even when his behavior is awful, right? Maybe this is somebody who calls him 6 times a day, and acts like they're married, right? There's a lot of enmeshment that you see in these relationships, not always, but some. They're like, how he gets, and really talks to you like you're meant to accept this person and you are meant to accept the treatment of them. And you could also have a mother-in-law that maybe is like, I raised him better than this. Did you? You know, I would really question that. Did you? Because look how this person turned out, right? But typically what you see in those cases is, I raised him better than this, therefore you've made him this way. You've caused this, right? This is your attitude that's driving my baby boy to behave this way, because it's never them, right? So they'll clean up their son's messes, their toxic, abusive messes, hide, protect them as necessary in their mind. And then they will not really hold them accountable in any way, and they'll blame you. Now, a lot of this, we're going to get into the reasons, but it has to do with them not being able to take on that blame on themselves. But this is, a mother who might have praised you to your face for the strength that it's taken to stay in this relationship, even, but then mocked your breakdowns behind your back, right? And honestly, that kind of silence, that kind of complicity, it literally breaks you twice, right? Once from him and again from her. So you're left wondering, is this where it started? Is this what caused him to be this way? And I really understand that line of thinking, right? Because it feels like she created him. She protected him and frankly still protects him. So it makes sense, right? But if she helped to create this monster, then maybe she's the one with the key to changing him. Maybe if she had loved him better, maybe if she had stepped in earlier, he wouldn't be like this. And so I see people in my coaching practice sort of asking themselves this really impossible question, like, could this all have been prevented? Now, if you hold the belief, not the false belief, but if you hold the belief that abusers are created by parenting, and then you look at who does the majority of the parenting, then we're just set up really well to blame women for the absolute willful choices of men. And I have a problem with that. You know who else has a problem with that? Lundy Bancroft, the author of Why Does He Do That?, which is arguably one of the best books ever written on the subject of domestic violence, right? Narcissists aside, abusiveness is not created because your mother traumatized you. Period, full stop. A lot of people are like, I disagree with that. And I'm okay when people disagree with absolute unequivocal facts, because they are facts and they remain facts, whether or not people really believe them. So I would always encourage people really to challenge that, to look at that, to find all of the overwhelming evidence to support that abusiveness is not a learned behavior just because you have an enabling toxic mother. So even though, yeah, she helped shape his environment, and we're talking about trauma, as something that shapes you, it isn't the cause of abuse. So you can be traumatized and it's not the cause, and it can shape some of your experiences and contribute in some ways and still not be the cause. So there's actually no evidence anywhere ever to support that trauma is the cause of abuse. So I'll stop repeating myself now. Now, I'm not defending the mothers, okay? I actually want more so to expose why this happens, because the truth is, if we don't understand it, we're more likely to just kind of keep falling into this and really stay trapped in this confusion. And I think that fundamentally, understanding the difference is very critical between the enabling of and the cause of. If you don't, you're going to keep hoping that she can fix him and blaming her for it. And she can't. She can't fix him, and she won't, but she can't. So if you don't know me already, my name is Lisa Sunny. I am a trauma-informed coach, and I'm an expert in trauma bonds, domestic violence, abuse, narcissistic abuse, and really understanding the dynamics of toxic and abusive relationships. And I've worked with thousands of women who have lived through relationships just like this one and had interesting relationships with their mother-in-laws or their boyfriend's mothers. And I was in a relationship like this too. And truly, when I talk about this, I am not guessing. I know how much the confusion weighs on you and how much trying to understand the family dynamic of someone else's family contributes to the confusion of sort of like, that's why he's like that, instead of looking at the real reasons. And I know for me, I have seen the lies and I've seen the betrayal and I've survived the gaslighting that doesn't just come from the abuser, but the entire abuser's family, because they're so intent on holding up, and propping up this abusive person just in defense of perhaps their own family. So why do some moms do this? Every time I've made a video on this topic, tons of people are agreeing in the comments, but there's always a handful that are like, not my mother-in-law, not my man's mom. She absolutely condemns his behavior. That's phenomenal. It's rare. I love that for you. So a lot of mothers, in fairness, don't want to see the truth, right? Because if they see who he became, then they have to face how he became. And again, there are experiences and traumas that contribute to this. And fundamentally, it doesn't mean that she caused it, but I think that she's probably clinging to the denial to protect herself, because a lot of mothers are really trapped by their own identity, and their self-worth is so tied to being a good mom. So if you admit that your son is abusive, then I think that there's a piece that might feel like, ooh, then maybe I'm a failure. And that's really hard for people. It's so easy to say, just admit you failed, but I don't know if there's any more important job in the world to be good at fundamentally, right? Raising humans. And so admitting that you're a complete failure, that's very hard. So instead of that, and I think often this is happening on an unconscious level, but you kind of rewrite the story, right? So she's going to say, he's stressed and he's misunderstood, he's sensitive, or she's causing it. There's going to be she being his wife, his partner, his victim. So she tells herself that you have done something to cause it, because it can't be her baby boy. It just can't be. She convinces herself that you're provoking him and that you must be nagging him, or you're making things harder than they need to be. Because if you're the problem, then she doesn't have to face the reality that he's abusive. I think it's not even that she created the abusiveness. It's that he's not abusive. Abusive is this big bad thing. It is. And that's not what her son is. He's reacting to you. It lessens how bad this is. And she, in some ways, needs to believe that. So she sort of protects this really fragile story that she's been telling herself, I'm sure, for years, that he's a good man. He needs to stay that good boy that she raised. The alternative is unbearable for some mothers. It really is. They need to see their son as the victim. And, when we're talking about abusive men and narcissistic men, you really see this victimhood. And I will always say, just to not get attacked in the comment sections, my content focuses specifically on talking about abusive men. When I talk about abusive men, it doesn't mean that abusive women don't exist. It means that I don't talk about that. That's not my primary focus. So sometimes you're left wondering, and I see this so commonly, is she a narcissist? His mom is a narcissist too. I just know it, right? And a lot of people think that If the mom is narcissistic or the parents are narcissistic, then the children are narcissistic because it's learned. Narcissism isn't learned. There's genetics. I've got other videos on that. And I always want to recommend a phenomenal book called The Nature and Nurture of Narcissism by Dr. Peter Salerno. It is phenomenal. You're going to learn a lot about where narcissism comes from. So the truth is, when you're wondering if the mom is a narcissist too, it's a fair question. And I think that you see a lot of this sort of calculated behavior in her, cold, even really cruel. She centers herself. She denies your reality. She plays both sides. Man, that was my experience. And, maybe she's a narcissist, maybe, right? But maybe she isn't. And you'll probably never know, like you'll never know if he is one or not. Although I will also note, to interrupt myself again, that narcissism is a personality trait. Narcissistic personality disorder is a personality disorder. People can be narcissistic without a clinical diagnosis. So the truth is, whether anyone's a narcissist or not, the impact of these actions are really the focus. That's really what matters here. So if a mother chooses to enable abuse, then she's part of this kind of machinery that keeps the abuse going. And it's fair to be upset about that and hold her accountable for that. So if you've ever asked yourself that question, is she a narcissist or not? It's not that you're wrong, right? You're noticing patterns, you're noticing the dysfunction, and whether it comes from fear, control, codependency, narcissism, it harms you and it needs to be named. It just has to be. It's important. And so they see you, the woman holding her son accountable, as the problem, which is sort of ironic or interesting because narcissists also see you as the problem. They reject the idea that they are a problem and they truly believe. So we talk about blame shifting as a tactic. Yes, but they do also believe that they are not the problem and that you are the problem. And so mothers may, if they're narcissistic, feel exactly the same way, or they might be unconsciously protecting themselves from that, which we're going to get into the cognitive dissonance of that as well later in the video. But it's easier for them to honestly see you as the threat than it is to admit that they didn't teach him responsibility and accountability or respect. And I do want to point out that in this video, we're not just talking about true narcissists. This is about abusiveness in general. So I think that they confuse love with rescue. And instead of helping him face consequences, right, they actually shield him from the consequences. And they see that as protection. They see that as helping him when it's in fact not helping them at all. And they kind of coddle and minimize and excuse, and it's infuriating. And they believe that protecting him from pain is their demonstration of love. It's wild. They are so afraid of losing control. And, we see this a lot. It's going back to the enmeshment that I talked about earlier. Some mothers really have these unhealthy emotional attachments to their sons. And even right now, 2025, you see all these videos like #toxic-boy-mom. And it's constant, right? You can be a mother to a son and not be a toxic boy mom and enmesh yourself with your children. When you enter the picture with an enmeshed mom, you are taking a spot. You are taking her spot. You become the woman in his life when she used to be. So you are a threat to their attachment. That's how they see you. And if their identity and their whole kind of meaning is wrapped up in needing him or in being his mother, then when he chooses you and he chooses adulthood and independence, a life where she is not the center anymore, you can see, right, in a warped way why this is so impactful for this type of mother. So she will resent you and she might pretend to like you in a keep your enemies close kind of way. But I think what they're doing is really fighting for this fantasy, right? She needs him to be the good son. She doesn't have to look at herself. She doesn't have to, face her own wounds, her own choices, or her own blind spots. So she will just preserve the family image. That's what matters. And in so many families, appearances matter so much more than reality, right? She would literally rather have you suffer quietly and not tell anyone than admit that her family isn't what she wants people to believe it is. It's very common. And so she's not just enabling him to protect him, it's part of it, but she's actually enabling him to protect herself. And yes, it's cruel because it ultimately leaves you feeling abandoned and isolated and blamed for something that is unequivocally not your fault. She raised a monster, and now she's protecting this costume, this mask that he wears. And calling him out, bad things happen, right? She risks losing her relationship with him entirely. For some mothers, that loss is unthinkable, right? And as a mother to a son, I cannot even imagine, but it's also hard for me to even think about what that would be like to have my son be that way, because it is so foreign to me, because I care so much about empathy. But I also, maybe having been through what I've been through, I can't imagine enabling that kind of behavior either. But maybe she feels like losing her son would be losing the last sense of her self-worth or her identity. Some mothers are truly terrified of being alone, right? And if they're in an unhappy marriage themselves, I mean, imagine, right? Their son is the emotional stand-in, right? They're the one who listens. They're the one who protects or validates them in ways that the husband never did. My abuser was treated like a husband to her. And I remember the entire time thinking, like, that's weird, right? When she needed anything, she would call him. Like, that's bizarre to me. She had more than one son. She had a husband. It was so bizarre to me. Things would get done around her house that wouldn't get done around my house. And yeah, she would say, hey, you need to take care of your responsibilities at home, and yet not actually do anything to support that. And additionally, not that we can backtrack, but you haven't raised him to even believe that that matters. Not that it's all within her control, because one thing we never talk enough about is abusive fathers, but I digress. Sometimes I think that her marriage is something that she sees as like, this is what marriage is, and this is what it is between men and women. And, women endure and men erupt. Men are angry and women are forgiving. There are patriarchal views that are everywhere that we can't get away from. So peace can honestly mean silence sometimes. You want peace, she has to be silent about what she's seeing. Maybe she's silent about what's happening in her own marriage too, right? Abuse, hey, it's just part of love. If she holds that belief, right? In fact, my abuser's mother was like, all men cheat. All of them. It's just something you have to accept. And I'm like, no. And what was insane was that was the one thing I was 100% sure would never happen, because he had witnessed that. So growing up. And so it was like, that'll never happen, because he was so anti that. Anyways, I ate my words later. But patriarchy teaches women that if you challenge a man, you're going to get punished. And so if she holds that belief, if she has not unlearned that and decentered men and really done some healing work of her own, she's not going to challenge any of this. She will appease it, and likely unconscious, likely, not always. So if she's internalized those beliefs, then she probably thinks she's keeping you safe by telling you to stay quiet and accept it. And again, if you believe that all men cheat, then if your husband cheats or your partner cheats, why would you leave? So you can go be with someone else who also cheats, because they all cheat? I would like to note they don't all cheat. So that's not even a true statement. In fact, in all honesty, an equal amount of men and women cheat. So it really isn't just men. I rarely defend men, but I have to give them that one. It is not mostly men that cheat. But the truth is, her conditioning, it's not just emotional, it's generational, right? If she was raised to believe that men are entitled to their moods and women are responsible for everybody's comfort, then this makes sense. This does not excuse her choices, and it is a choice to enable. It just explains why her loyalty is to the system, right? Not to your safety. That's a really hard fact, and that's a hard pill to swallow, but it is true. And when someone is afraid of the truth, they're going to defend the lie that costs them the least. And I would say for her, that protecting him probably means she doesn't have to face what she allowed, and it allows her to protect herself from really acknowledging who she's become in the process here. And so, I remember the last time I ever spoke to my abuser's mother. Like, I remember like it was yesterday. I remember where we were standing. I remember everything about it. And I remember her kind of talking to me about, she hoped that, you know, her and I could work things out and still be in touch, and, you know, for the kids, and just, you know, be mature about it, and whatnot. And she referenced this point that she told me, repeated to me, the lie that has been repeated to her about issues and domestic violence, physical domestic violence that happened in my relationship. And it irked me. And I was like, do you even realize what has made you and I not get along? Because he has said things to me about the kind of mother that you were to him. And although I recognize now that so much of it is a lie, and now that I know you, I know that so much of these things are not true. You have to understand that when I went into this, a lot of the conflict that you and I have had is a direct result of these lies that I was told. And I told her some of the lies. And I think that even, you know, my opinion is that the reason we have never spoken since that day is because she cannot accept that he said those things about her. She cannot accept that. She needs to believe that I made them up to, I don't know, destroy her relationship with him, instead of facing what is so clear to anyone on the outside, if you're not involved in it, that he said these things, and that he did try to destroy her reputation, and that, you know, he doesn't want harmony and peace anywhere in his life, and that all the chaos that has ever happened to him is a direct result of his own doing. That's too much for her to face. So she needs to make other people the enemy. But the truth is that her silence has made him complicit. She will happily fight domestic violence charges, domestic assault charges, criminal charges, happy to fight that for him, happy to pay for those things, because he didn't do anything wrong. Because either I'm lying, and the girl before me lied too, apparently, or, you know, he was provoked, and it's everyone else. It's not her baby boy. And I understand the feeling, and I don't care that someone feels that way. I don't care that anyone's abusive partner's mothers feel that way, because it still enables the abuse, and pushing back is hard, and it's brave. It takes so much courage, and so many people don't have the courage to break generational trauma. And so the impact is the wives, the girlfriends, the children of these abusive men are the ones that get impacted the worst. And then it never stops. That's the worst part about it, is that it never stops. Not every enabling mother is evil, as much as we sort of paint that to be the case sometimes. I really believe that some of them are just deeply broken women. Some were abused, some were betrayed, some that, you know, taught that survival was silence. When you have spent your whole life being minimized and gaslit and blamed, it literally is second nature to protect the system instead of dismantling it. And that, honestly, that's the tragedy. It's really the tragedy, because it doesn't excuse the harm, and yet it's happening. And in some ways it can even create some empathy, which fair, but, you know, empathy without obligation, right? She had choices, and she still has choices. And yes, her wounds are real, but they don't cancel out your wounds. Everything I've said about her trauma, her conditioning, her fear, I promise you it is not meant to create empathy, because, like I said, and I will repeat it, at the end of the day, mama has a choice. She has a choice. She can choose to stop enabling him. She can choose to call out his behavior, to stop gaslighting you on his behalf. She has a choice to stand up for what is right, even at the cost of her relationship with her son or his affection, right? She has a choice to break the cycle, even if she was raised inside that cycle. So whether she can see the truth, not see the truth, whether she chooses not to, refuses, it is not your job to figure this out. Her blind spot, that's not your burden. That's her burden. And her loyalty to him, there's nothing you can do about that. She's not going to choose better. Then the only thing you can do is choose yourself. That's all you can do. You get emotional whiplash coming out of these relationships, right? I think one of the most confusing things, and we referenced this earlier, is when she does actually condemn his behavior, like, you know, he shouldn't have done that, or I'm sorry you went through that. Like mine would say, right, I don't know how you put up with him. And then she would make a joke about like no refunds as if she's not going to take him back. But I'd been crying in her bathroom days before. She knew, she was aware. I would tell her things. And, on one hand, like I'm tattletaling to his mother, which he called me out on frequently. But meanwhile, like for what? For validation, as it turns out. But at the time, it was like accountability. I want other people to know what you're doing. But meanwhile, when you're trying to hold them accountable through telling their biggest enabler, it's not going to go well. It's not going to go well for you. But I think to her, like, truthfully, I think my pain was a punchline for her. It was just boys will be boys is the best way I could sort of summarize her attitude, right? But these mothers, they stand by them, they defend them, they pretend that it didn't happen. And I remember actually, she said to me when I confronted her once about what he had done, that, she absolutely understood that he was wrong in so many ways, but she also said, yeah, but it takes two to tango. So the expression, it takes two to tango, which is totally inappropriate when it comes to abuse, because first of all, we're not dancing. This is domestic violence. And every expert who has even half a brain knows that mutual abuse does not exist. And therefore, it doesn't take two to tango. But again, this supports that view. If it takes two to tango, then yes, he hit you, but what did you do to deserve it? How did you provoke him? Because he would never do that unprovoked. And you see that, in fairness, from a lot of men and women, but that sort of idea of like, yeah, but what happened right before this for you to make him do that? As if men are not fully autonomous human beings who, generally speaking, do whatever the hell they want. It's interesting how they need to be provoked to be violent. They don't actually. I mean, literally, they don't need to be provoked to be violent. But I remember saying back to her, man, I've spent thousands of dollars on therapy to understand that abuse is a choice and that it's 100% the fault of the person choosing to be abusive. It doesn't take two. It's not a tango. Your son assaulted me. Like I was just crystal clear. But I remember she paused and she said, you hit him first though, right? Isn't the story that you slapped him first? You admitted that. And I was like, I absolutely would never admit to something that didn't happen. That's not true. I maintain that. I've said it the entire time. But she was like, no, you hit him first, right? You slapped him first. And I looked at her and I said, you mean like Cassandra did, which was the previous girl that he assaulted? She got so defensive. And she said, he never hit her. He was just defending himself. And I'm like, you don't see the pattern? You don't see that he keeps getting accused of domestic violence? Like he's literally facing his second trial for DV charges. And both times you're sitting on the sidelines defending him, funding his case. It's wild, right? But she would see his behavior and she would call him out. And I'm like, this is the thing that's too hard for you to believe? Repeated behavior? So that disbelief is common, right? But you might be sitting here hearing this story and knowing your own story. And like, how can someone see this much truth and yet still choose the lie? Well, that's cognitive dissonance, right? And that's not rare. And I think that it's just devastating when you're on the receiving end of it. And know that. I mean, we talk about cognitive dissonance ad nauseum. You've experienced cognitive dissonance. If you have children, they've experienced cognitive. This is confusing because there's always sort of two truths, right? So in many ways, she's experiencing something that you're experiencing. But I think for me, that moment, that story, right? That was the moment for me that everything really clicked. And I think I realized she doesn't want the truth, right? She literally wanted a version of reality that's not going to destroy her fantasy about who she is and who she raised and what kind of family that she's a part of. It doesn't matter how much evidence there is that he is not who she thinks he is. It doesn't matter. And I think that it's very painful because admitting it, I don't know, maybe it gives her the illusion of being like fair, like it takes two, that's fair. That was the closest she could get to believing that he's abusive. But I think that believing that truth, it requires a kind of courage that she just doesn't have. And I say she in the context of all of these toxic, enabling moms that do this. It is so easy to pretend that it never happened. It is much easier than to face reality. So if we really look at what makes him abusive, I want to be clear that she is part of the story, but she's not the cause. And I'm so sure that there are people in the comment section that are be like, no, but in my case, she was the cause because she's also abusive. And so he learned it from her. And I'm just going to tell you that you are unequivocally wrong because it is just not how it works. Even if she taught him, which I doubt, meaning she taught him like, here's how to be abusive, it doesn't come from that. A person can still make a choice. The abuser is always 100% responsible for choosing to willfully, consciously abuse. This is a power dynamic that is fed by the patriarchy. Women subscribe to the patriarchy, unfortunately, because we're still dismantling the system, but they don't cause it. He is abusive because he feels entitled to control you. He's abusive because it works. He's abusive because he chooses to be. And that's really all that needs to be said on that topic. Period, full stop. His mother doesn't cause the abuse. So I really want people to focus your anger on where it belongs. This actually kind of reminds me of something interesting because you always see this, like if a person cheats. So let's say a man cheats and you're mad at the mistress. And a lot of people are like, nope, you can't be mad at the mistress. She had absolutely no responsibility to you whatsoever. It is 100% his fault. I agree that it is 100% his fault. And I disagree that you are just not allowed to have feelings about the person that was the mistress, let's say. And the reason I say that is because two things can be true at the same time, right? She can be horrible and it can be completely his fault. They are both horrible and it is his fault. And I'm not talking about the mistresses that were lied to, right? But the ones that willfully entered into these relationships with married or taken committed men. So similar with his mother, she is part of this and enabling him is a problem and we're talking about it. And he is 100% responsible for choosing to be abusive. Two things can be true at the same time. So just keep that in your mind. Her denial, her silence, the excuses, all of it. I get it. It is so painful. It's damaging, but they're not the origin of his violence. So be upset at it to a point and then focus on this person and what they've done to you. And then focus on yourself and your own healing because that's where it all, you can let go of it all. But he's not a puppet, right? He's not some byproduct. He is a man. He is making a choice to control, to dominate. It's a choice. So she might protect him, but and cover for him, right? But she's not the one holding the weapon. So it's enraging. I mean, there's no denying that. It's absolutely enraging, but I don't want you to lose sight of the actual source of abuse. We can't lose sight of that. It's so important not to. So let her choices just be part of the truth, right? But don't let them distract you from what's really going on. Entitlement is really the engine of abuse. And let's say choice is the fuel. Plenty of people survive awful childhoods and choose compassion. 60-something% of people who have been through traumatic childhoods do not go on to be abusive, right? So he's choosing cruelty and dominance, and it's not because of his mother, it is because of him. This is really hard for people to see. And the truth is, it's because survivors like you, right, so deeply empathetic, you want to understand. You want to believe that people can be healed, that love can fix what's broken. And what a beautiful belief, right? But abusers rely on that so heavily. They're banking on it. And his mother relies on it too. So if you stay confused, you stay manageable. If you keep doubting yourself, you're not going to stand up and push back. So this emotional inconsistency that you see delivered in these relationships, love one moment and betrayal the next, it keeps you stuck hoping for this good side to win, as if there's two sides and it's sort of like, I don't know, an internal battle that they're having. But the truth is there's no good side that's going to save you. There's only reality, and there's only the willingness to face it that's actually going to help you. You're battling in your own heart, right? This view, the love who he pretended to be, and we love the fantasy of who they are, who they seem to be. You see glimpses, and even from their moms, I think you see glimpses sometimes of who they seem to be, a good person, a nurturing, kind person, and maybe that feels real or honest or good. But the truth is that is cognitive dissonance because you're holding the he loves me and he hurts me in the same hand. And betrayal blindness betrayal blindness really kicks in, because facing the whole truth, then you have to take action, right? That demands that you do something now. And sometimes you're not ready yet. I have a lot of clients that have been in these relationships or marriages for like decades. So it's like, oh, leave your husband, leave, just leave. It's only been 30 years. Just leave everything you know. Like, that's massive, right? And their family becomes your family, good or bad. This is everything you've known. Now, I realize they're not all that length, but it's hard no matter when. You become attached. And so grieving these relationships is really hard. And I actually find grief to be a really interesting thing here, because we think of grief in the context of someone has passed away, but now you are grieving the loss of a family, grieving the loss of who you thought his mother was, who you thought he was, and grieving the future is so hard because it hasn't happened yet. It's an idea. Why are you so attached to an idea? But of course you are. That's human. You are human. So if you even grieve the idea that someone could have saved him, someone could have raised him better. Like, I had a client once who was like, I wish he was adopted, then he had a better chance. I don't know if that's true. You don't know if that's true, particularly with the genetic components that are involved here. But if you let that go, that you now have to face that he was also not yours to save, that he's unsavable, that it's a choice, right? He was never lost. He was choosing to be abusive. He is choosing to be abusive. So real love doesn't require you to abandon yourself, and it doesn't punish vulnerability, and it doesn't expect loyalty to lies. It just doesn't. This is what abuse does in every case, right? So if you are still blaming his mom, you're going to stay so stuck hoping that she'll wake up, she'll see it, she'll fix him, she'll say something, she'll stand up, and it'll have some kind of impact. But that's not what's going to happen. If someone else could just say the right thing, then it would then it would crack him open, right? He doesn't care what I say. He cares what his mother says. He doesn't care what anybody says. That's not how this works, right? I think we think that they would finally get it or finally change. But I'm telling you, abusers do not stay abusive because nobody ever told them that they're abusive or that their behavior is wrong. That is not why they stay abusive. They stay because it works, because it benefits them. Abuse benefits them, right? So there's a lot of misplaced hope that you're putting in him, and perhaps she's putting in him too. But we need to rewrite our own story and separate, detach, self-validate. You're not crazy. This belief that someone else can change him, that is something that it's important to let go of, because the longer you're waiting for someone else to save you, the longer you're going to stay trapped, and you truly deserve freedom. Now, I do want to just add, because we talked very little sprinkle about the dads, okay? I hear so many people say, well, his dad had nothing to do with this because his dad left, his dad abandoned him, as if abandonment of your father would have no impact on you. But anyway, we spend way too much time talking about the abusers' mothers, and we need to unpack this a bit. And I won't go into full detail here, but I will say this. Men don't learn abusiveness from their mothers. They learn it from men. And this is where people will be like, well, his father wasn't around. I don't care. When I say men, I don't necessarily mean his father, although maybe, right? Maybe his dad was abusive. Maybe he was emotionally absent. Maybe he was never there. The culture of male entitlement does not start and end with one man. It's boys learn this from fathers and brothers and coaches and uncles and media and movies and pastors, all of this, what it means to be powerful, what it means to be respected, what it means to be a man. Lundy Bancroft actually says this best, that abuse is not a mental illness. Abuse is not a personality disorder. It is a belief system. I mean, I would even go so far as to say narcissism does not cause abuse because it is still a choice. I understand that's a huge factor. And on the flip side, Dr. Ramani has said out loud many times that she believes that all domestic abusers are narcissistic, and I fully subscribe to that. But in a patriarchal society, men are often taught that men deserve control and men are owed loyalty and men have the right to dominate. So the truth is, whether or not his dad was present in his home, the ideology was present in his upbringing, because the truth is it's unavoidable. And narcissism doesn't come from trauma. Abuse doesn't come from trauma. Behaviors are choices that are then supported and protected and modeled within the patriarchy. So if we keep looking for this wound to explain his violence, then we're taking this huge risk that we miss the actual truth that this was never about what happened to him. It is actually about what he believes he has a right to do. That's the key. This is why these men don't change, right? And this is what I encourage people to explore while you're leaving, not staying and try to fix him. The longer you are sitting here trying to be the exception, the more you lose, right? You can't outlove this. You can't outloyalty this. You can't outpatient it. Can't outsacrifice it. That's not how it works. His belief system is older than your relationship. And frankly, it's stronger than your hope, right? You're not here to be his turning point. Abuse is a belief system. Let that sit with you. It is a belief system, right? His mother isn't confused. She's committed. And perhaps you can relate in some ways, right? But you can't outlove someone's entitlement to power. You need to see clarity as a gift and see all of this knowledge and resources and videos and books that are here for you to learn and grow. I have an amazing course called the Trauma Bond Recovery Course that has helped thousands of people learn what's really happening. And then the program completely shifts into inner work, learning about yourself, what got you here from a place of curiosity, not judgment, and really just learning how to get yourself out of this trauma bond, out of this relationship, out of this cycle, heal yourself, love yourself so that it never happens again. These are resources that I really encourage people to read, to take, to watch, right? Even when it hurts, your instincts are telling you something. It's why you're watching this video right now, right? It's an act of self-respect. So if this video in any way has helped you name what's happening, but you just don't know how to break free, please check out the Trauma Bond Recovery course. Check out the Trauma Bond Recovery Journal. I also run a live interactive group coaching program. I co-host it with Dr. Peter Salerno. But you don't have to do this alone. I can show you how, because that's the step, right? I know what I need to do, but how? That's the number one question. So if you really want to understand what causes someone to be abusive, it is so important to learn that it is not from trauma, that it is entitlement, right? And so subscribe to my channel. Please don't miss videos like this. I'm here to help you. I'm here to help educate you. So thank you so much for being here, and I will catch you in the next video.